Okay, and welcome back to Heart, and thank you again for joining us this evening. My name is Kristen Hanson, and we just got done speaking a whole lot about boundaries and a whole lot about that issue. And joining us this evening, again with us, is our friend and colleague, Natalie McGovern with Blissful Living. She was kind enough to join us again this evening and share with us her wisdom and knowledge. And Natalie, welcome to the show. How are you?
Welcome, Natalie.
Hi, I'm really good.
Good.
Your shows every week make me think about things in new ways, so it's been exciting. Today I had all these cool experiences because of the topic of your show.
Thank you. You know, it's one of those topics. It's not like a big, huge, hoo-ha, hot topic like we had last week. We had love addiction, and we have all these other interesting ones. But it's one of those that is kind of at the core of everything, because if we don't get our boundaries right and our self-respect and get our self-esteem up, the rest of our healing really can't take place.
Right. Oh, I know. It's so funny because you're completely right, and I don't think that most people know about boundaries. I know I didn't. It was so foreign to me.
Well, go ahead. Well, why don't you go ahead and tell us? That's what I wanted to start us off with first is, why don't you go ahead and share with us your experience? How you, what did I put it here? Did I did not put it here. Okay. So what about you with boundaries in your business? How often do you see people with boundary issues in your business?
Oh, I would say that I've never had a client who hasn't had that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Because one of the reasons is they may have some areas of their life where they're okay at setting boundaries, but usually if somebody has gotten into a place of imbalance in their body or their life, there is somewhere in their life where appropriate boundaries aren't set.
Sure.
Or even their own boundaries with their self-care and what that looks like for them. So somewhere in their life, their boundaries have become skewed, and then a codependency or something has set in, and so it's always something that I have to work with people on. And so when you're helping people with stuff like that, you have to walk that talk, and it can be just so hard. And listening to your body is, like you said, a really great way to know where you're at with things.
Oh, for sure. And that's what I was going to ask you originally. What is, share with us how important it is as a practitioner and as a person, it is to establish solid boundaries. Tell us your experience and what you've been through in your life, if you would, please.
Yeah, well, I don't feel like and I'm sure my parents would be upset if they heard me say this, but I really don't feel like I was raised with appropriate boundaries, but it really was not my parents' fault. They were themselves products of their own family. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So they actually, one of the most funnest things of these last years has been teaching my parents. I feel like I am my family's teacher, and teaching my parents about boundaries and teaching them that it's okay to set boundaries with me, and that they can choose what those are, and that even if they haven't done it for the last 38 years, that it's okay in year 39 for them to start. And so we didn't have a boundary set in my family when I look back now, and I know what an appropriate boundary is. There was lots of skewed boundaries on all sides, and that falls over into your life then. And I really think, when I really think about boundaries, I think it's a spiritual issue.
Oh, interesting.
I really think that when someone isn't setting a boundary, or really stating what their needs are, or looking at what the others are and looking at that it's about not being in alignment with your true authentic self, your spiritual truth.
Absolutely.
And so then that's, you're looking at that. And I think that the closer you get to your own spiritual truth, the easier it is for you to set boundaries, because it's unacceptable for you to not stay in alignment. And then you just learn how to find really kind ways to do it.
Well, that's it, because it is especially challenging when we have to set boundaries with people in our family that are older than us, or people that we're intimidated by, or maybe a boss, or maybe a coworker. You know, there comes, and especially because some of the time they have a strong personality, and we're like, you know, how are we going to deal with this, and what's going to be the remark? Because, you know, sometimes we can work with people and be around people that's just their way, and that's become accepted by everyone around us. And then we come in, it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, and I like that you talked about setting boundaries with people who are older than you, because it can be really challenging, not just with family members, but as a healer. And I remember one time I was having a discussion, well, it was an argument with my mom, and she believed she was right and I was wrong, and my opinion was wrong. And she said, she kind of just summed it up and said, it doesn't matter anyways, I'm the adult and you're the kid.
Ooh.
And it was only 2 or 3 years ago. And I just kind of stared at her for a minute, and I was like, gosh, I don't see any children in this room. I don't see any children here. And I think that, you know, sometimes that happens where they forget about the fact that, okay, now we're on more level playing fields here. Granted, yes, you've lived more years, but I have found that sometimes living the more years is not necessarily more beneficial. I'll tell you. I
agree.
These children today are smarter than any people I've ever met in my entire life. And they have some really, really interesting things that if we listen to them, we would learn a lot. And so sometimes these old ways that we've been thinking for years can really press upon people's boundaries, because you're being forced to act and behave in ways that just are no longer serving not just you, but humanity. And it's an injustice. And it's time to stand up and say, no, I'm setting new boundaries with the food and the government and relationships and just everything, where you have to say no after a while. And the great thing is that you don't need to say why you're saying no.
Well, that's the wonderful thing. Like you say, with my family, my personal family, my mother and dad, I never really had an issue with that. I was a problem child, so they didn't really say a whole lot about a whole lot negative to me in certain areas like that. You know, my dad would kind of get on me about stuff, and I think in his way, he was trying to help me, but some things would come off that would hurt me, and then it would kind of be like, you know, it wasn't very healthy in those areas. But you're right in a lot of areas, a lot of ways as to what people think is the right way, because they've been going through that for so long, and that's just been the way that their father did it, and that's the way they did it, and that's the way you're going to do it. They think that's correct, and it's like, no, there are new and better ways to do things, and we have to find ways to let people know how to treat us. So for you in your life, did you have a time when you had like really poor, skewed boundaries, making bad decisions, just being?
Oh, completely toxic. They were so awful. It was, it literally is an embarrassment for some of the things. And the really amazing thing is that it is my hopes, because I had, you know, from about the time that I was 18 till about the time that I was 32, I had a very toxic life.
Right.
And I had a lot of toxic experiences with people. And I know my hope is to begin to share healing with the world, as many people as I can share it with. And I know that as I walk forward into that people will come forth, that I did have these toxic experiences with, and they may share them. And I hope that they do, because it's living proof that you can heal that way of thinking and being. And it's also a way to show people what that toxic lifestyle can bring in, how sick people can get when they don't have appropriate boundaries. And they are doing things that are codependent and harmful to others and themselves. Yeah. I feel that my lack of boundaries is what caused me to get as sick as I did.
Really? You know, and it can be because we're not making good choices. We're not making good decisions. We're doing all these things.
Yeah. And it does sometimes become a health issue because, like you said, sometimes people with work, they're working, harder and longer than they physically are actually able to, and there's just nothing they can do about it, or maybe their family's suffering, and all sorts of things. So I do think that it's an issue of humanity right now, and I think it would be really great if people started to learn how to set boundaries. And it is kind of a difficult thing to begin to do, but one thing that I found is to just be so authentically honest about what you're doing. And I used to just say to people, I've never had boundaries in my life, and I'm trying to teach myself how to set them. So I'm going to tell you how I think and feel right now. And if I mess up, or if this seems harsh to you, or if I hurt your feelings, could you just be understanding of the fact that this is so new to me that it's painful for me too?
Well, that's awesome. I never thought of that.
Nor did I.
Yeah, because it is a painful experience to set a boundary when you've never done it. Mm-hmm.
It is, even for
when you're in pain, sometimes your delivery sucks.
Well, it truly does. When I started to get well, I was so, instead of being, oh, excuse me, can we sit down and have this conversation because I really don't appreciate the way you're treating me, started off with, well, yeah, yelling at the top of my lungs and swearing at people, and, you're not going to do this, and I'm tired of this, and throwing all kinds of stuff around, and I felt justified that I laid down the law, but, I killed 3 people in the process, so I had to bring it back and learn how to, there is a more humane approach. So what I'd like to do while we're waiting is if we have anyone that would like to call in or have any questions for Natalie. I know someone we had on Facebook, a friend on Facebook, wanted to call in, and Lois, if you're listening, if you wanted to call in, Natalie's ready to talk to you. And until someone does, we're just going to talk here for a minute. What would be the best possible way that you could tell someone, or a close friend or family member, how would you set a boundary for them? Say that there's someone who likes to pick on you or ridicule you, or they're that family member that always has to comment on something that you're doing. How would you set a boundary with someone like that?
Mm. Well, one thing that I've noticed that has really worked for me in my life is, and this is going to sound selfish at first, but when I explain it, you'll understand, is I always make it about me. And so if I was trying to explain to somebody a boundary I was setting around maybe them making fun of me, or perhaps, can I use one that I actually, Natalie? that I did?
Yeah, Natalie, excuse me for 1 second. We just had it. We just had a call in. I'm sorry. It just came through. I'm sorry. We're going to get back to that in just 1 minute. Hi, who's calling?
This is Lois.
Oh, hi, Lois. How are you?
Welcome to Heart to Heart with the Hansons.
Well, welcome to our show. Thank you. We're going to, Natalie was just, because usually we have people that are going to call and then they don't, so we just got started. Anyway, go ahead if you have a question for Natalie, please.
Me or somebody else?
You, Lois, just said, yes.
No, I mean, you guys were talking about the boundaries, and I guess I get it too. With family, I guess I've had it for so long, and then now I have that issue with my kids because they see how my family treats me, and they do the same thing. So it's been a big issue for me.
Okay, Natalie, can you hear me? Okay, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, one of the things that we were just talking about when you called in is it is oftentimes about sitting the people down that you're setting the boundary with, and actually having a really gentle, frank conversation with them about yourself, boundaries, and why you're choosing to set them in your life now, and what that's going to look like from here on forth. And so if you're doing it with people who are willing to sit down with you, then that's fine. Oftentimes, Lois, is you need a mediator. You need a life coach. So I will have lots of times where families will come in and they only need a session or two, and it's literally somebody to mediate the boundaries, to talk about what is working in the family and what isn't working in the family, because the family is essentially a business. It's your business of your love. It's the business of your soul. And when you create a family, when you come in together and you create a family together, this is the business of your soul. And you need to run your business of you need to run your family like you would run a business. So you would sit down together and you would create an intention and a plan for what your family is going to look like. What's the purpose of this family? And how is this going to look? And what are our boundaries and rules with each other going to be so that we can grow